Subo ug maayong hapon usab sa ato nga kaigsuunan sa Kabisayan ug Mindanao, dakip na dito sa Luzon. Karong hapuna tuguti nga makiginabi ako kaninyo sa pinulungang Ingles tungod kay gawas kanatong mga Bisaya ubay-ubay usab ang nasayod ko nga buot mahatagan o kasayuran sa mga panghitabo kabahin sa atong mga paninguha labi na sa OFWs o returning overseas Filipinos. And so, in order that I may be fully understood, especially by our brother and sister Filipinos in the other parts of the country, as well as outside of the Philippines, I shall be speaking as much as possible in English. Do give me your indulgence if at times I may inadvertently revert to speaking in Cebuano kay mao man gud na ang among namatan nga panultihon. Allow me to first report on the COVID situation in the province of Cebu. I believe that this is very important because recently I have noticed a trend in the reporting of COVID cases, especially by the Department of Health, either by one of their consultants or advisors, or by Dr. Bergeri herself. And it would seem that the reporting has now shifted from actually focusing on local government units. The reporting now has come out in terms of regions, which is quite disturbing because it would tend to put other local government units in the same situation as those whose cases may be rising, even though these LGUs are not similarly situated. But if you just identify per region and then keep on announcing that cases are rising in so many regions, including Central Visayas, it gives a misimpression that since Cebu is part of Central Visayas, then for those who may not be privy to the proper data and figures, they would seem to think that Cebu as well has an increasing number of cases. So let me make this very clear so that we actually base our decisions on actual data. Let our policies be data-driven, not based on generalizations and worse, assumptions and speculations. Let me start. As always, I take for a reference the DOH case bulletin that they issue every day. And so, as of yesterday, May 31st, the total number of cases, since this is the only disease that we keep on running up a cumulative total since the very first case was discovered way back last year in 2020. But let it be, because perhaps COVID-19 is really so special. So, the cumulative total for the entire country, according to the DOH, is now 1,230,301. It's there for you to see. This is the cumulative total of 2020 and part of 2021. That is 5 months of 2021, 12 months of 2020. Of this 1,230,301, 93.9% have recovered. A highly recoverable disease then, hitting the upper 90s. the active cases, no, let me first go to the mortality. Porsyento ng namatay. There are, according to the DOH, since last year, 20,966 deaths. I wonder how many deaths have also happened since last year due to tuberculosis or due to flu. By the way, there's no more flu. Yeah, I forgot. No more flu. It's gone. At any rate, with 20,966 deaths, including that of last year, it still stands at 1.7%, a very low mortality rate. 1.7% at 20,966. What is the percentage of active cases right now? 4.4%, or 54,290. Right now, the active cases, we know what active cases are. You take away the mortality rate, you take away those that have recovered, you are left with the active cases. Active cases are 54,290, of which, according to the DOH, 95.5% are mild and asymptomatic! Exclamation point. Let me read this again. Halos 95.5% ang mild at asymptomatic! Exclamation point. I don't know what the exclamation point is for. Maybe they are surprised, or they are trying to emphasize a point. They are emphasizing the exclamation point. So, 95.5% are asymptomatic or mild, of which 93.3% according to DOH. 93.3% or 50,000 are mild. What is mild? Meaning, you have symptoms like a slight fever, cold, you cough, and all of this. Or maybe loss of taste. Maybe if you're on a diet, you really lose your taste. Isn't that what most of us want? You don't like to eat anymore. At any rate, 50,664 are mild. 1,124 are asymptomatic. So, which of these need hospital care? Moderate of 695, severe of 977, critical of 760, total 2,432 in the entire country. That's the entire Philippines. The number that needs hospital care is 2,432. That's according to the DOH. You can always refer to the occupancy level or the critical care utilization rate. That is all there. From the looks of it, they are well below the 60% critical, whether it's in the NCR, in the entire Philippines. The highs are at 57%. Now let's go to the province of Cebu. And this is our report. The active cases right now stand at 355. 355 are active. The asymptomatics are 53.3%, much higher than the national DOH tally. The mild asymptomatics are 46.7%. Hospitalized, 79. The mild asymptomatics and symptomatics, the asymptomatics and mild symptomatics are in isolation. That's 77.7%. Our recovery stand at 93.1%. Of those who died, DOH figures stand at 730. But as I told you, here in the province of Cebu, we double-check. Where do we check? The death certificate. The death certificate, you cannot lie there. You actually have to put the real cause of death. And in the province of Cebu, of the 730 deaths, 533 are incidental findings. What does this mean? This already include those that died because of a motorcycle accident, those that died because they had a sudden heart attack, that died of diabetes, died of other causes, and yet, even after death, they are swabbed. Even though there is supposed to be no post-mortem swabbing, they are still swabbed and found positive and automatically registered with the DOH figures as COVID deaths. Well, we all know how huge the sums are for COVID cases in terms of PhilHealth payments. As high as 750,000 for critical COVID, 400,000 for mild to severe, 160,000 for COVID suspect. Do you know how much the PhilHealth reimburses for another disease that is just as infectious? It is also airborne, and it can take you 3 to 6 months to recover. It does the same damage to your lungs. Do you know how much PhilHealth pays for this disease? Which, by the way, I'm referring to tuberculosis. PhilHealth pays only 4,000 pesos. So there is no incentive for other diseases. It is COVID-19 that is highly incentivized. But we insist in the province of Cebu that we report as accurately as possible. And that is why, of the 730 deaths, only 184 are confirmed COVID. This 184 corresponds to a low 1.2% fatality rate. I understand that there were attempts yesterday in our meeting in Malacanang to present some figures trying to prove with their figures that we have a high fatality rate in the province of Cebu. However, somebody else pointed out, look, you are not presenting the province of Cebu. The province is different from another city. And so they were unable to present it. Well, here, I shall present the actual status of the province of Cebu. I know that some of those whom we met yesterday were trying to claim that we had a much higher fatality rate than the national average of 1.7. Well, each and every death in the province of Cebu, all 730 of them, we have their names. And we have looked into each of their death certificates. Because, you know, we do validate our figures here in the province of Cebu. And so when I say that of the 730, only 184 in fact have been confirmed COVID deaths, I say that with great certainty because we have our evidence. What is 184? In comparison to the total number of cases logged in the province of Cebu since 2020. 184 as compared to a total of over 15,000 cases in the province of Cebu reckoned from March of 2020. 184 corresponds to 1.2%. 1.2%. Please take note. You may contest that. You may debate with that. We are more than willing to show you our evidence and our methodology at arriving at this number. So, you are welcome to challenge that, but unless you can, with your own verified, validated figures, then this stands. This is 1.2% of the total cases. So, from January 1 to, in 2020, we had a total of 6,982. From January 1 to May 30, 8,689, or a total of 15,671 cases. Total number of deaths at 730, and recovery stand at 14,586. You want to see the graph? Since our first case logged sometime in April, on a weekly basis, these are the number of cases that we got, or positive tests that we got on a weekly basis since 2020. From April 26 to April 31st of 2020, we had 3. It went up to 28, went down to 12, went up to 18, until we reached a peak in 2020 from June 29 to July 5. No, on July 6 to July 11, we reached a peak at 499. And then steadily, it went down. There's a sudden spike, and then it goes down. The lowest that we logged was in 2020, December 20, in the week December 20 to December 26, where we got only 21 positive cases for that week. Thereafter, again, the cases started to rise, and we peaked at 735 sometime February 28 to March 6 in 2021. And then we again started to decline in the number of cases, where as of May 30, in the week of May 30 alone, we have 24 cases. What am I trying to say here? This is the nature of the disease. It goes up, it goes down, goes up and goes down. But it shouldn't mean that every time there is a spike or a surge, we immediately lock down. Because lockdowns don't work. They just aggravate the situation. And at this point in time, after more than a year, further lockdowns will just further devastate an already devastated economy. And who are going to suffer most? Not those that make their hypotheses and come up with their figures in the clinic. Clinicians who now hold power over people's lives with policies that they just come up looking at figures. It is actual people. It's the people who suffer. Because every number that you log or you try to analyze in terms of what? In terms of increase or decrease, each number corresponds to a person. A person who can suffer if policies are not tempered by our sense of humanity and our sense of reality. Because that is most important. You have to have on-ground experience. You have to be in actual interaction with people, the people whom these figures represent. My point here is, cases may go up and may go down. It is not so much about achieving zero COVID. Some countries have done that. And yet, cases again return. That is a pipe dream. We have not even eradicated fully measles, of which we have vaccinations for our children every year. Polio came back after a hiatus of several years. Rubella is still here. What about dengue? What about tuberculosis? Why must we focus on COVID that has a mortality rate of less than 2%? In fact, by DOH report, and this already includes those that died where COVID was incidental, meaning died of other causes. Even at that number, fatality or mortality is still at 1.7%. So it's not about totally eradicating COVID. It's about being able to manage and contain it, which we have shown these past 10 months in the province of Cebu, where for the past 10 months, the province of Cebu continues to be on MGCQ. Let me repeat that. The province of Cebu, for the past 10 months, continues to be on MGCQ quarantine status. In spite of the fact that we have reopened tourism, that we have reopened the economy, and where we have become more sensible in our requirements for those coming from other parts of the country intending to visit Cebu. In the province, no RT-PCR test is required. We only require a valid medical certificate and symptom screening at the point of departure and arrival, and then observe our minimum health protocols here in the province. Have we experienced an uncontrollable surge? I would dare say not. Yes, we have had spikes and then the attendant decrease. In spite of the fact, think about it, while others would resort to immediate lockdowns each time there is a surge or an increase of cases, we have not. And yet, if you look at our graph, it continues to go on an up and down basis. But our economy has started to recover. People are now slowly trying to pick up the pieces of their lives shattered by all of those restrictions that have been imposed, causing businesses to close, jobs lost, and livelihoods gone. Now, we are slowly putting the economy on track. So, again, if you can see, we are showing you the graph. These are the weekly new positive cases from April 26, 2020 to December 31st, 2021. It's the same up and down cycle. That was for April 6, 2020 to December 31, 2020. And now you have the January 1st to May 31st, 2021 with the same. Let me take special note and call your attention to, as of May 30, we had only 30 new cases. 24 new cases. And so far as active cases are concerned, we peaked in 2020 at 1,530 sometime June 15. And then they started to go down. We peaked again in 2021. We went down to 63. By December 37 to 31, we went down to 63 active, meaning minus the deaths, minus the recoveries, active. We went down to 63 active cases December 31st, 2020. And in 2021, we went up, peaked at 1,290. Now it's going down. We are now at 355 active cases. So these are the weekly active cases last year and this year. So, take note. My Executive Order 17, number 17, which now required swabbing upon arrival of all ROFs and OFWs at the airport. And then they would go to wait for test results in the hotel, which come out in 24 or at most 48 hours. If found negative, they are allowed to continue their quarantine on home quarantine with their families, because OFWs and ROFs have such little time to spend. They are not coming home for tourism purposes or to have a grand vacation. Firstly, for most of them, they come home because there are family emergencies. It's either there's someone who's very sick or someone has died. These are the purposes that they come home. Some of them would need to borrow money in order to buy the plane ticket, just so they can come home. So that further subjecting them to pay for 10 days for their hotel accommodation would be really such a horrendous burden on our returning Filipinos. Whereas, for OFWs, it is so easy to say there's a budget, OWA will pay for it. But remember, that is still taxpayers' money. In the executive order, OWA would only pay for 2 nights. In Cebu, it's 1,400 a night, meaning 2 nights will be 2,800. It's higher in Manila though. I don't know why. It's 2,500 to 2,750 a night. In fact, our HRAC here has been asking for the same treatment, because why should they be paid only 1,400 where in Manila the rates are already at 2,500 to 2,750. In any case, 2 nights here in Cebu would cost 1,400 times 2, that's 2,800. But if they stayed for 10 days, that would be 14,000 pesos per OFW. 10 OFWs would be 140,000. 100 OFWs for 10 days would be 1.4 million. 1,000 OFWs, well, you do the math. That's already 14 million. And we cannot just say, well, anyway, OWA has the money. Our experience right now here is that OWA is even hard put to pay its obligations to the hotels. At any rate, my executive order became effective March 31st. And I call your attention to the active cases. On March 31st to April 3, our active cases stood at 1,057. As the weeks wore on, where we would test all arrivals at the airport, you see, if you would still wait for the test to be administered on the 7th day while they are in quarantine, you never know whether our OFWs or ROFs have had contact with with the hotel staff and others. You cannot be watching with, let's say, 600 OFWs and ROFs arriving per day. For 10 days, that's already 6,000. How can you monitor 6,000? And that's even a very small number. So, this way we are able to immediately find out upon arrival if in fact the OFW or returning Filipino may be infected with COVID. So, is there a correlation now? Perhaps. Because this was the process last year for returning Filipinos and OFWs, swabbing upon arrival. And yet, by January, as I told you, the cases started to rise. Again, after December, our cases started to rise, January, up till March. That was the time when there was an IATF resolution requiring testing to be done only on the 5th day. And that was religiously followed. I had not interfered then. It was religiously followed. And so, what did we see? The number of active cases from January 1 to May 31 saw this steady increase. I only intervened when, because of the longer stay of OFWs and ROFs, where instead, the previous way had been test upon arrival, wait for 2 days, then you go home. But with the new requirement of IATF, as a reaction to the then UK variant, remember the UK variant? Where everybody was forwarding really scary messages about the UK variant. As a reaction to that, they imposed the 5-day wait before testing. So the arriving OFW or ROF would go straight to the quarantine hotel, wait for 5 days before they are tested, and then the test results come out, they actually wait for 8 days. What did that cause? A shortage of rooms because there was now a longer layover of our returning Filipinos. But it's interesting to note that in the province where we hit the lowest of 63, December 31st, from January, we steadily rose to 158, 421, up to 1,290 active cases. These were the times from January to March that our cases were steadily rising. Was that cause for alarm? It was cause for concern, yes, but we were able to manage both the Tri-Cities and the province because we had enough hospital beds. I will show that later. However, when that IATF resolution came into effect, putting off the testing on the 5th day, we saw the rise of cases. We peaked at 1,290, and then, take note, when my executive order became effective in the week March 31st to April 3rd, April 3, this is the time. In that week, slowly our cases started to drop. When we again required the testing of all arriving Filipinos, international arrivals at the airport, our cases started to drop. Which is why, right now, our weekly COVID active cases So now we stand at 355. These are the active. A low of 355 in a population of 3,300,000. That's 0.01%. What is the hospital bed occupancy as of May 31st, 2021? As I told you, in the province of Cebu, we have 400 beds available. Right now, 89 are in these beds. 43 for COVID, 35 for ILI, 11 for SARI. So we have 311 available beds, or occupancy of our hospital beds stands at a mere 22%. This is for the information of those that really wish to put down Cebu but you do not have the right data. So you can question this, you can challenge this, but it would be good if you would validate it because we're sure of our figures. Occupancy rate is 22%. We have 78% or 311 more beds available. In the isolation centers, we have 2,494 available beds. Only 3% of that has been occupied. There are 79 that are in isolation. So 97% of the 2,494 beds, or in numbers, that's 2,415 beds, these are still available for possible isolation cases. So, in the entire Central Visayas, because 2 days now, DOH has been steadily announcing that cases were rising. Focus on Central Visayas, especially since Cebu is in Central Visayas, the favorite. Per DOH report, and I wish that these people in Manila who keep on reporting about Central Visayas would study their own report. Let's talk, as I said, it's not about the number of cases. It's about managing it and containing it. Containing COVID. In the entire region Visayas, Central Visayas, there are 60 facilities with a total of 2,127 beds. Occupied are 656, vacant are 1,471. So you have the breakdown on the other side of how many are available in terms of ICU, isolation, and ward beds. That's Central Visayas. So in spite of the repeated warnings now coming out, which now sound rather suspicious, that Central Visayas cases are rising, bed occupancy, or what you ought to know, as the critical care unit rate. Bed occupancy still stands by your figures. These are DOH, not ours. By your figures, Central Visayas bed occupancy still stands at 30.8%. What do you define as critical when 85% of that is already occupied? You define it as high risk when 70% are occupied. So, we stand at 30.8. Safe pa siguro na, Dale, no? Ha? Do you think? In Central Visayas still, and let's talk of Cebu Island, meaning the 44 towns, the 6 component cities of the province of Cebu, and the tri-cities of Mandaue, Lapu-Lapu, and Cebu City. What is the situation in terms of critical care. There are 36 facilities in the island of Cebu alone. In the 36 facilities, there are 1,515 beds available, of which 332 are occupied. Therefore, 1,183 are vacant. Therefore, in the entire island of Cebu, bed occupancy stands at 21.9%. You can check this, you can challenge this, but we stand by this because these are verified and validated. That's the way we report, and that's the way we make policies. Validated, verified, data-driven. What is the status in Bohol? You see, that is why I have tried to understand why the DOH has changed its tack in reporting. Where before, we would have a province by province, city by city report. Right now, for the past several days, from Dr. Altea de Guzman, from Dr. Vergere, we keep hearing about cases rising in so many regions, and we're talking now of regions. I wonder if they have even tried to visit Central Visayas for them to realize that the 4 provinces comprising Central Visayas are 4 islands in themselves. You see, we're not like Metro Manila. We're not like NCR, where you're one huge mass of land. Over here, in Central Visayas, Cebu is one island, Bohol is another island, Siquijor is another island, and Negros Oriental is part of the entire Negros Island. Just a little bit of geography. Because then, you see, I know that some of you have been pushing for a whole-of-nation approach where one policy should apply to the entire Philippines. Please understand that we are not the same, nor are we similarly situated. Some of us are islands, some of us are landlocked. Some of us, perhaps, have learned from what we've gone through this entire year of having to grapple with this challenge, this COVID-19 challenge, and have instituted practices and procedures that now, by actual data, have been shown to be effective, while others, well, they have their own fears and their own analysis. We all analyze anyway. Give us that recognition. All of us were given brains for critical thinking so that we may be able to weigh things accordingly and come out with the best possible position or solution. So Bohol is another island. What is the situation in Bohol? In Bohol, there are 16 facilities. They only have 289 beds. That used to be our position way back last year in the first half of 2020. And that was when the city of Cebu reached critical levels of bed occupancy because they had very few beds. But as I said, we've learned from what we've gone through. Right now, in the entire island, well, in Cebu City alone, there's over 900 available beds. So in Bohol, bed occupancy now stands at 55.4% because of the 289 beds, 160 are occupied. Only 129 remain vacant. In Negros Oriental, bed occupancy stands at 57.6%. They have 7 facilities. And they only have 257 beds available, of which 148 right now are occupied, leaving 109 vacant. That's 57.6% bed occupancy. Let's not talk about Siquijor because it's either they have 1 case or 2. So you cannot even lump Siquijor as rising cases. But you compare the island of Cebu's bed occupancy at 21.9%. Bohol stands at 55.4%, and Negros Oriental stands at 57.6%. Obviously, there is a huge disparity in numbers between the island of Cebu and Bohol and Negros. So please do not lump us all together into one Central Visayas region and stating that cases are rising in Central Visayas, because you see, that is not entirely accurate nor honest. That's intellectual honesty, because while Negros and Bohol, that's intellectual dishonesty. Because while Negros or Bohol are indeed part of Central Visayas, but so is Cebu and so is Siquijor. And cases are not rising in Cebu nor in Siquijor. Let's not try to gloss over very, very important facts in the hope that Cebu will be carried along with this misimpression that in fact the entire Central Visayas cases are rising in the 4 provinces. Please refer to your own figures. Bed occupancy in Cebu is not even 1/2 of the bed occupancy for Bohol and Negros Oriental. Because, why do I emphasize this? It's about management. Even if, okay, cases would rise, do we have enough beds? That's what we should keep on repeating. It's not about counting cases. It's about managing the cases and containing it. Over here, we have that system in place to immediately trace and isolate. We're doing that. That's why perhaps Cebu continues to be a success story. Perhaps to the chagrin of some who wish to continue this fear pandemic and continue to pound on their justifications for lockdowns. What is the ranking? This you better see. This is from DOH. As of May 30, DOH.gov.ph, COVID-19 tracker. Now, I wonder, no? You have this, DOH. By city, you have this ranking, by city and province. And yet, when you make announcements, you make sweeping announcements, lumping everything into regions. That gives a misimpression. It's the same way as saying, we now have 1,200,000 cases of COVID in the country, in the Philippines, forgetting conveniently to say, however, 94% have recovered. So you might think, oh, there's over 1 million now that are positive with COVID. Their hospital system must be overwhelmed. Conveniently, not mentioning that right now the active cases stands at only over 50,000, of which 94% are asymptomatic or mild, exclamation point, according to DOH. So you see, in the papers, what lands there are the statements that cases are rising in Central Visayas. Okay, then let's use your own COVID-19 tracker. The top city or province, number 1, in terms of 100,000 population, let's have a sense of scale. Because you cannot say that if you have 100 cases in a city that has a population of 10 million, that would be the same as 100 cases in a small barrio with a population of 200. You get my point? Let's have a sense of scale. So we have here the total population, the total number of active cases, and what is that in relation to the population. We did our own calculation. So the city of Makati, with a population of 582,602, has 844 cases, or equivalent to 1.57% of their population. Per 100,000, there's 145 active cases. Pasig City, with a population of 755,000, active cases at 1,085, but you see there, the active cases of Pasig are higher than Makati. But the population of Pasig is also higher than Makati. And that is why, per 100,000, Pasig's 1,085 stood at 144. A little lower than Makati. The third is Baguio City, population of 345,000. There are 464 cases and that at 134 per 100,000 puts Baguio City on third in terms of active cases per 100,000. Next is Cagayan, City of Parañaque. Sixth is Quezon City, City of Valenzuela. Number 8 is Taguig. Number 9 is Pasay City. Number 10 is Laguna. Oh, do I see Cebu here somewhere? Do I see Cebu? No. This is the top 10. Makati, Pasig, Baguio, Cagayan, City, Parañaque, Quezon City, Valenzuela, Taguig, Pasay City, and Laguna, the province of Laguna. What is number 11? Isabela. 1.4 million. The province of Isabela, 1.4 million. They have 1,133. That's 78 per 100,000. Next to Isabela is Manila. Then Cavite, Davao City at number 14, Pampanga at number 15, Caloocan, Bulacan, Batangas, Negros Oriental is number 19. Part of Central Visayas, but not the entire Central Visayas. Negros Oriental, with a population of 1,354,995, with 785 cases, stands at 58 per 100,000, or number 19 in the ranking. Number 20 is Rizal. Number 21 is Cebu City, Cagayan, and the number 23 is Bohol, part of Central Visayas, but not the entire Central Visayas. Number 24 is Lapu-Lapu. Number 25 is Pangasinan. Number 26 is Mandaue City. And, lo and behold, they are ready ang Cebu. Number 27, with a population of 3,226,290. Right now, we have gone down to 295 active cases. Ano man yung 295 naman yung 335 pa ni ganina? This is DOH din. So, lower pa din yung figures. Thank you. So, at 295, DOH figures na. That's 9 per. Bisang pag i-335 na to, mas updated man ta. Kaya kani sila, wa man sila ka-validate pa. Wa ka-apas. So, at 295, we are number 27. Cebu is part of Central Visayas. But be that as it may, magsige man good, gi-single out man ang Central Visayas. Ikapila man di ay ang Mandaue, number 26. Lapu-Lapu, number 24. Cebu City, number 21. Ang Bohol, number 23. Di naman ta sa 20s. Negros Oriental man ang dias number 19.
Malower pa. Wala man ni ma-appeal. Malower pa.
According to Dr. Yango, may suko gini mo ning mga bright nga consultant sa DOH. Unsa ni? Ikaw ra istorya?
Eastern Visayas and Western Visayas and some cities, wala pa ni siya ma-part ani, so maybe lower ba atong rank.
So in this report, because we just got their figures from DOH, in this report, Eastern Visayas, Western Visayas, and some cities, provinces from Central Luzon that is not part of NCR Plus were not included. Therefore, I wish that they would read this because this is their own statement, DOH. Therefore, rankings for Central Visayas cities/provinces may be lower. Oh, they're the ones arguing against their own numbers. But we are, ang pinakaduol siguro, Negros, number 19. All the rest, di asa 21, 23, 24, 26, 27 with the possibility nga mas lower pa gyud ta. Okay, there are other parts in Eastern Visayas, Western Visayas, and Central Luzon that have not been included yet. So I hope that they would read their own figures rather than every time they face the media, they focus on Central Visayas, cases rising. Well, you know, cases rise and cases fall. But are we managing? That's the big question there. If you cannot manage, then we have a problem. Houston, we have a problem. If you can't manage it. So it's time that perhaps instead of ostracizing us, Cebu, and claiming that we are defiant, we are not following, violating, why don't you try and look just what we may actually be doing right? Because perhaps, I'm not saying for all, but perhaps it may be applicable to some other LGUs. Before you make broad policies, standing firmly by your firm commitment to a one whole of nation approach, please look at the figures and realize that we LGUs are not similarly situated in terms of COVID active cases, in terms of COVID-19 response protocols, and in terms of geography. That's the most simple. So I decided to give a report. I do not always make this a daily thing, but I felt that this was time to speak out. And I did this prior to my report about my meeting last night with President Rodrigo Roa Duterte, because I know that several media outfits are also monitoring this particular live press conference. I would like to ask for your indulgence that I have not acceded to your requests for interviews, members of media. I felt that it would be best that I would speak once so that there are no misinterpretations, so that there is a live recorded feed, so that should I be misquoted or should there be other angles that would be focused on, then the public can always go back to the complete and recorded story. Okay, I shall proceed as regards our meeting with President Rodrigo Roa Duterte by answering your questions directly.
Good mayong hapon. Kung say results in yung meeting with the President?
last night, after the PDP Laban National Council meeting, where I delivered the welcome remarks as Governor of Cebu, since the National Council meeting was held right here in Cebu, we flew to Manila. With me was Secretary Michael Dino, Presidential Assistant for the Visayas, Dr. Jean Loreche, our Chief Pathologist at the Department of Health, Mr. Edmund Liu of the Project Balik Buhay, and General Mel Feliciano of the Chief Implementer for the Visayas. And we reached Malacanang at around 6:06. We had to subject ourselves to the health protocols such as the rapid test and all. So we finally saw the President at around 7 in the evening. And he was accompanied by Secretary Anyo, Secretary Duque, Secretary Harry Roque, Secretary Delphine Lorenzana, and Secretary Galvez, as well as, of course, Senator Bong Go. And the President stated that it seems that in Cebu, you are not following the IATF guidelines. So what is this? You have to follow. Although, on the same breath, he also said that I do recognize the help of the local government units in the implementation of policies, and it is the local government units that are actually on the ground. The President, having served as mayor himself of the city of Davao for 27 years, I know that local governance is close to his heart, and he understands how it is running a city or a province. So I explained. I believe that for most of our fellow Filipinos, you are already aware of the difference. But for those who do not, may I repeat, EO 17, subsequently supported by a provincial ordinance, states that upon arrival, ROFs and OFWs are swabbed. This is what I told the President. And then they are brought to the hotel. They wait for 2 days. For Cebuanos, if they are tested negative, they go home to their LGUs and they are swabbed again on the 7th day. They continue the required 14-day quarantine at home. For non-Cebuanos, we ask them to go back to their own provinces, where they shall subject themselves to the health protocols of that particular province. I said that we have not, the way I see it, Mr. President, we are in fact innovating to make it more effective for us. I also pointed out that we saw a steady increase of cases after the 5-day testing rule was implemented, where the returning Filipinos would first be brought to the hotel and they would only be tested on the 5th day. So that when we implemented by March 31st, going back to the old procedure of testing upon arrival, we saw the steady decrease of cases. And I said, in fact, in Cebu, we have made it even stricter in the sense that it is not a single swab. We swab twice. Because once the returning Filipino goes back to his home or his family, he is swabbed again on the 7th day. And then I brought out the humanitarian aspect. Said, Mr. President, these OFWs do not come home to have a good time, actually. Sometimes they do not even have enough cash to pay for the ticket. They borrow money or do a cash advance. And then they come home because there is a reason. It's in times of emergency. It's either that there's a member of the family who is very sick, or someone has died, and they're just trying to come home to pay their last respects and say their last goodbyes. We have to look at the humanitarian aspect here, because I know how much you love the OFWs, who we all agree are our unsung heroes. They work abroad, they go through so much hardship in order that they may make the lives of their family a little better. And in fact, they are the pre-COVID, they were the single biggest dollar earner for the country. Now, while this new policy would put further strain on the OWA, because instead of paying for 2 days, this policy of IITF requires a 10-day stay in the hotel, which means that would multiply by 5 the cost. Worst is the strain on returning Filipinos where there is no OWA. And they would have to pay. And they will not be paying the discounted rates of OWA. In Cebu, it's 1/4. But they would have to pay the standard hotel rates of 3,000 to 5,000. So 30,000 to 50,000, you know, that amount of cash can do so much to help their family, and yet they spend it in the hotel. I could see how the president really felt for the OFWs and the returning Filipinos. But he asked for Secretary Duque's opinion, and Secretary Duque started talking about variants, and it's really dangerous, and even if they are tested, they can still be, it can be a false negative, and then when they go home, they may be there's the transmission. And I said, I'm sorry, but if you do not believe the first test, and that's RT-PCR, then why must we conduct another test on the 7th day? What makes the first day test different from the 7th day test? If you do not believe that if a person is negative, that is possibly false negative. What about on the 7th day? Well, you wait for that stretch. How do we monitor these returning Filipinos? We do not have enough hotel staff. How do we know they will not have interaction with hotel staff? And if they're in fact infected, they could already cause what you are afraid of, transmission. Well, Secretary Anyo said, you are probably showing that it's working, but what if other regions will do the same and nobody will follow anymore because they will have their own way? Well, my answer to that was, shouldn't it be the other way? Like, if you see something working, wouldn't it be worth it to study it? And perhaps find out why it's working? And see if this could perhaps be applied to other regions? If you were to be very, very strict about it, we are only arguing about the hotel stay, which is a heavy financial burden and a heavy emotional burden on our both OFWs and ROFs, away from their families, especially in times of emergency, the very reason why they came home. Dr. Jean Loreche came complete with her figures and showed that Cebu has been able to manage. The variant that you had first segregated as P.3, which later on they called the Central Visayas variant. We are so special to them, really. Very special. In other places, it's called the UK variant, South African variant, it's called now the Indian variant. But in the entire universe, there is only one regional variant, and that's the Central Visayas variant. They were saying, this can be like Indian variant and all. See, Dr. Jean showed that we have been more religious in sending samples. And in the samples that were sent, there was only one that was really confirmed as a UK variant. However, we were able to show that testing upon arrival showed a 0.30 positivity. So that 0.30 were found to be positive. You see, if we were only test them in the 7th day, what would have happened? I also said, because they were insisting that it should be on the 7th day because it's the strongest, you have the highest viral load. So I just asked the very simple question. If we believe that everybody should be tested on the 7th day, are we to presume that everybody who arrives every day coming from different countries, subjected to different environment, are all to be reckoned from day one? That they could have been already infected, pero day one. Because we are all counting them as day one. I said, what if someone arrived and he's already day 5? But we did not test him because we'll have to test him on the 7th day. By that time, he would have already passed his highest viral load. And he could already have been talking with the hotel staff, or for all you know, might have escaped from his hotel room to go to his family. I mean, these are just very simple questions, but they say that our science tells us that, it should be done this way. So Dr. Loreche said, because Secretary Duque emphasized to the President that, variants might be very highly transmissible and very lethal. It could be very virulent. So it was Dr. Jean Loreche who said, viruses mutate all the time, Mr. President. That's the nature of the virus. And that is why there will always be several variants. Variants. And that it is all about being able to contain and being able to manage. In the end, the President advised Secretary Duque to study our procedure here and see if this could possibly be a good way or innovation that could be adopted. Secretary Duque at first said that, yes, we will discuss this, but or words to that effect, that our minds are made up. So the President had to repeat to study. So they were given until Thursday. At least we did all that we could. Secretary Michael Dino, in fact, because Secretary Anyo said, okay, your cases may be low in Cebu, but we have data to show that the cases in other provinces are rising because they came from Cebu. So Secretary Michael Dino had to speak up for Cebu, being a Cebuano himself. And he said, I'm sorry, I find that statement very unfair. How can you prove that? I found it illogical. Because if they came from Cebu, how come our cases are dropping? Wouldn't the more logical thing have been, our cases are rising, and so we are infecting the others? But, well, it gets more and more confusing over there. I think si Senator Bongo, and I have to say this, he really spoke up for the Cebuanos and the ROFs and OFWs. So we have to thank Senator Bongo. He said that, I've been to Cebu, Mr. Mayor, he calls the President Mayor. I've been to Cebu together with E.S. Medialdia. Cebu is doing good, doing fine. We can see that how they are facing this crisis is in a way that they are able to manage and able to, in fact, open the economy now and tourism. So, and I also know what a heavy burden this is for our OFWs and ROFs, because I get all of these calls asking for help. See, Senator Bongo. So he spoke up for this, and maybe he said it's really worth studying how Cebu is doing it. I could see that the President's heart was really for the OFWs and ROFs. I mean, he's a very sincere person, so I could see that. he also understood the duty that all local chief executives face, the accountability to the people that we carry every day. Advisors and even unelected officials, they have no accountability but to the appointing power only. Our accountability is to the people. And he understood why I had to do this. In fact, I thank the President. I heard him clearly when he said, Gwen, you're a very proactive leader, and that is good. So we will have to study what you are doing. In the meantime, national policy has to be followed. In the meantime, national policy must be followed. And however, we do not admit that we are perfect. So that if your ways could be found to be effective, then perhaps this can even be followed by others. So I told him, Mr. President, on the national policy must be followed. I said, Mr. President, at any rate, flights have been diverted. Flights intended for the Manila-Cebu International Airport have now been diverted to Manila. So we don't have any arrivals. And my executive order and the provincial ordinance cannot apply in Manila. So until the Secretary Duque, Secretary Anyo discussed this, and well, Secretary Harry Roque also spoke out, and Cebuanos have to know this also. He stayed in the middle. He said, Mr. President, I have to speak. I know that you asked me to speak to Governor Gwen, knowing that she's my BFF. And every time that I talked to her, I kept on repeating that national policy, IATF is national policy, and national policy must be followed. But on the other hand, Mr. President, maybe it's time to ask, why is Cebu still MGCQ after a long 10 months? NCR was never able to achieve that. So what is Cebu doing? Maybe it's time for us to study how Cebu is doing it. That was his statement. In fact, I was happy because at last here is someone, a spokesperson of the IATF, keeping an open mind about finding out what are we doing right over here in Cebu. And so that perhaps what we are doing right could contribute in whatever little way we can to moving forward from this pandemic and easing people's burden, the burden of a devastated economy. But at the same time, being able to maintain health and safety protocols, because obviously numbers don't lie, figures don't lie. Our cases continue to be low. But then, for those that may be experiencing high numbers now, maybe they could also people's burden. They may also take a page from the Cebu Handbook on how we manage times when we had increases or surges. Perhaps that's something that might help. I mean, we are all Filipinos here. We want to help each other. Let's help each other as a country, as a nation. And this is not all talk over here in Cebu. This is all supported by validated, verified, irrefutable data.
Doc, just a follow-up. What will happen to your executive order, Padayon Gihapon, status quo?
Once the period of diverting the flight would have elapsed.
You know, I never answer speculative questions. You know that. You know me better than that. So I am reporting to you on what is. I do not want to be those that I have recently criticized, that they have, with their hypothesis, come up with policies that severely burden people because they have based all of this on their presumptions and speculations.
Could they at least give a say as to when they would have the final say on it?
He was given until Thursday. Si Secretary Duque. In fact, the President repeated that.
So doon na ba yung laing meeting ng itabog ko with Secretary Duque and you?
No, I don't know. He said he will confer with his advisors again. The ones who are calling us Central Visayas variant and who keep on hammering the fact that cases in Central Visayas are rising. I just want to make it very clear to the rest of those of you who are listening right now, who are watching right now, Central Visayas, I repeat, is not just Bohol or Negros. They are part of Central Visayas. But so is Cebu, and so is Siquijor. And the 4 provinces are 4 separate islands.
How would you describe the meeting, the trip, the meeting? Would you consider it be successful with our objective of going there to Malacan?
May I cautiously state that in being able to present to the President our position, why we have done it, and how everyone was on board in coming up with this policy. In fact, well represented by the presence of General Mel Feliciano himself, who is Mista of General Galvez. And of course, you have the private sector there, si Edmond Liu. And you have the scientists. If they have their science, we also have our science. Chief pathologist, UP, a product of UP, Dr. Jean Loreche, and Presidential Assistant for the Visayas, who also, of course, is part of the Duterte administration and sees what impact this has been on the Duterte administration, because the diversion of flights was signed by Secretary Medialdia. So, right now, correct me if I'm wrong, but those that have been affected are feeling, bad against the President, not against IATF, not against Secretary Duque, or not against Secretary Anyo, but against the administration. And that is why Secretary Michael Dino also had to speak out in defense of the President. So, I think in the sense that the President was able to be given a different point of view. Because in fact, when Secretary Duque kept on repeating, Mr. President, variants are so scary, they can be highly transmissible, and we do not know how deadly they can be. Look at India, Then another scientist or another doctor spoke up, and that was Dr. Loreche, who said, Mr. President, viruses always mutate. In fact, the SARS and CoV mutated. This is what's happening now. We will see so many variants coming up. And I think it was kind of a surprise to hear that kind of different point of view. And more so, and most of all, the President in that meeting really showed his compassion for the OFWs and the returning Filipinos. You could see it in his face, how he really cared for the OFWs and ROFs. He was really trying to look for a way. First, he said financial, He was asking for a budget, if we have enough. But then he was saying, do we still have enough? So, Mr. President, beyond that, it's really, they're away from their families. They have very short time. There's an emergency that they have to attend to. And beyond that, this can work. We can have that quarantine. But let's do it at home. Anyway, returning Filipinos, OFWs, I am sure for many of them, their homes qualify for home quarantine. Well, Secretary Duque started saying that, but we have now found out that the high transmission is caused at the home. It's because of this home quarantine that is caused the transmission. It's very high. So I have to remind him, Secretary Duque, home quarantine is allowed by your DOH memorandum. You have a DOH memorandum circular which defines what homes can qualify for home quarantine. So you sanction it. You allow it.
How would you describe the meeting, the entire meeting? Is it tense or is it one lang, chill?
No, it's okay. I mean, may I say also that Secretary Duque, Secretary Anyo they were not hostile, no? They were very courteous. Secretary Galvez and Secretary Delfin were very quiet. Anyway, they were wearing masks, so I could not say whether they were smiling or not. But they never said a word. Senator Bong spoke up for us. We have to thank him for that. And Secretary Harry Roque asked a very valid question, very thought-provoking, but very important, saying, why is Cebu on MGCQ for such a long time now, something we have never been able to achieve here at NCR? Isn't it worth looking? What is Cebu doing? But you know, maybe I'll ask for low risk. Dugay naman tang MGCQ. How come we are not classified as low risk? And then our fans in Manila will say, no, MGCQ. Mga mag low risk, MGCQ. Low risk lagi ito. Dili, MGCQ. MGCQ.
Go, your message na lang to the returning OFWs na Cebuanos who are very much affected to this.
And may I now speak in Cebuano? Akong gusto ipaabot sa tanan nato gyud ng mga kaigsuunang OFWs, ROFs nga mga Cebuanon nga karon apektado tungod aning pag-divert sa flights that will be that would have been intended para diri sa MCIA nya tuwa na ron sa Manila. Nahibaw ko sa inyong giantos bisan tuod og ako mismo dili ko OFW, dili ko ROF, pero maminaw magud ko. Nakabasa ko sa tanan ninyo. Grabe ka iron hapit na mo buto ang social media kay bawo man mo sa tanan ninyong mga sites. Grabe gyud kaayo ang reaction. Nahibaw ko unsay inyong giagian ron. Gani dunay usa ka, and I was wondering ano wa na ninyo man-news. Dayong larga na mo gahapon, I was informed nga dunay namatay nga OFW.
Ikaw was no, sa news.
Na-news siya.
Na-news ninyo? Oh.
Ihatag sa inyo.
Naghuwat in town nga makauli. Kadto man gud unta. I-enforce unta to namo nga ini-test sa arrival kung negative nya dili ka taga diha para ato niya nga siya paulion na ta siya. Ato na siya magtiwas dito. Pero dunay uban regions mo dawat. Doon na sa uban dili. And perhaps wa tingali mo dawat tong Nueva Ecija niya. Mao na gipahuwat gyud ikapito nga test. Unya negative ra ba gihapon. Pero di man gihapon pagawason kay kinahanglan mo abot man na po kaadlaw. So 10 days. Wa na taon siya kaabot, namatay na. 41 years old. Nga babae. So kaning akong mga ato nga mga kaigsuunan karon nga Cebuanon nga apektado. Ang ako lang gyud ikasulti nga ipaningkamutan gyud ako tanan nga unta masabtan ang inyong sitwasyon. Grabe ng sakripisyo ninyo dito sa gawas. Pag-abot ninyo dili makatarunganon nga magpasan pa mo dugang nga kalisod. In fact, at one point in our meeting, the President said the same. It is the constitutional right of every Filipino to come home. And we must look into that. So, however, niingon Secretary Duque, kung katunang we talk about finances, that's already in the Bayanihan Act, there's already finances. Besides, for the OFWs, besides, anyway, these ROFs, they're a very little percentage. So I had to say that, beyond the numbers and beyond the figures, these are persons. These are human beings. And they are Filipinos. So we must not treat them that way, as mere figures. But at any rate, ampo na lang sa Senyor Santo Niño. Nasayod ko nga ang Senyor Santo Niño kanunay gihapon nga nagtan-aw sa matag usa. Labi na ang labing pinangga sa atong Ginoo, ang katong mga mas nagkinahanglan. We will continue, magpadayon ta, paningkamot alang kaninyo kay mao man na ang akong tulubagon ninyo. Og ako nang hinaot og nagampo, kuyugi ako sa pagampo nga ang atong mahal nga presidente makasabot sa inyong kahimtang o makasabot nga ang atong gihimo diri wala man magbutang sa peligro kaninyo o kaha sa inyong mga pamilya o sa inyong komunidad. Gani mas nakita nga doon na tayo gibuhat tingali nga eksakto kaya nag-ana magkaubos ang atong positive cases. O lang na.
Okay. More questions about this?
So, thank you. Salamat kayo.
Katong finished? Wala na? Wala na ilang questions about the Bagyo? Okay, questions about you.
Well, I think you're aware that tropical storm signal number 1 has been hoisted over 30 LGUs in the province. You already have that data, no? And this should include, aside from our towns and cities in the northern, central, and part of the western and southern parts of the province, we also include Bantayan and Camotes. We have already put in place our rescue vehicles and equipment on standby, as well as food and non-food items. Heavy equipment are all positioned in pre-positions sa north, central, and south of Cebu. And we have, of course, the PDRRM EOC has released the typhoon advisory to all council members and the LDRRMOs and raised the alert status to blue as of June 1st. Ang affected lang sa pagkakaroon due to the cancellation of mga trips sa barko, stranded passengers. We have 290 at the Danao port and 50 at the Agnaya port. So there will be, right now in effect, the Philippine Coast Guard has temporarily suspended all types of vessels or watercrafts from traveling.
Kung sila ni reminder ko sa mga Cebuanon, hilabi na nga, we observe sa mga niagi nga mga bagyo, even though the PDR mo man ka ng mga disaster personnel get on reminding, especially those fishermen, hindi gid managan, still naagi mo. So why? Para masikip mo ni mo.
Ikaw ha, sige ra kay. Nangita lang yun ka issue. I think that by now, we are not the country that we were mga 5 or 6 years ago, no? Tungod kay giagian ta pirmi aning mga bagyo, labi na katong grabe kayong Yolanda, unya uyog pagitag earthquake. I mean, the disaster response management systems are in place and people are more aware. And we always have, province can only do so much. It's really the LGUs. It's really our mayors on ground level and their local disaster rapid response management office. And that's all in place. So I would say that while we cannot always foretell the future, but murag na ingrained naman na sa kadaghanan sa mga Subuano to look out for ourselves. Pareha gud aning COVID good. After a year of controlling people, can we just give them now that ability, that God-given right to protect themselves? Kaya wa man tingali po'y gusto nga masakit o COVID. Wa man po tingali gusto nga takdan niya iyang pamilya. Balik-balik na nato, i-boost ang immune system. You take the necessary safety and health protocols. O gunya, kung doon naman tayo sintomas, magpalayo ta, dili ta magtakod-takod. Unya, di po tam diretso sa ospital, kay mapuno ng ospital, bisag nito lang na imong sipon. Apply the proper remedies, daghan na may nahibaw, ana. Di ba? Inom tag vitamins, inom tag daghan limonsito. Kung lain ang paminaw sa lawas, mag-unsa man ta? Unsa?
Stay in your life.
Ayaw ng tuob. Uy, di na, sosyal. Nana po yung mga suko, ano ron? Ayaw. Sosyal na sa Facebook. Ay, di ba? Kita naman sa Facebook. Dili tuob. Wagit ko na ingog tuob. Ito mga suko ba nga, dili sosyal. Steam inhalation. Anak, gid ka pronounce ha? Steam inhalation.
Okay.
Close
Closing
na
ko.
lang ikaw.
So,
Closing.
in closing, I think, especially for our OFWs and returning overseas Filipinos, you have been really monitoring the developments because you are the most affected. Some of us watching right now might say, who cares? But remember, for many other families who are living in Cebu or in other provinces or in the entire country, they have a son or they have a brother or they have a mother. They have someone in the family that will be affected because they are either overseas Filipino workers or OFWs, or they're located abroad, working elsewhere. They're now living there, but they'd like to come home at certain times. So many Filipino families are affected by this. So we are trying to find a way. No, we have found that way, in fact, with our system here. Custom fitting it to your situation. Not just thinking about the science, although our science seems to prove that it's as well. If here, in our own country, well, in the province, we do not require an RT-PCR test anymore for fellow Filipinos arriving in the province. Or for other LGUs, if they do require and you take the test and you are negative, you're allowed to walk around. So what is the difference? Is it the variants then it's so much better we are able to catch it upon your arrival so that we can test it immediately, whether you have been infected or not. But on the other hand, let us realize that there cannot be a double standard, actually, in the treatment of Filipinos. Every Filipino has a right to come home and be with his family. And so we hope that everything will work out in the end for you, our OFWs and ROFs. We pray that all will be well. Daghan kayong salamat. Maayong hapon.